It is good to have older people as best friends. They can even make your life amazing. They can teach you life lessons about things that you had no idea about. They can give you it. Because think about it, even though they lived in a different time period, they still lived and experienced things. Like, they had romantic flings, they had passionate loves, they had abusive relationships, they had money issues, financial struggles, they had fun, they had hobbies, they had life, they had their own parents they had to deal with. At some point, they were a kid just like you. And I love befriending old people because they can teach you so much about the world, which actually reminds me, I have to get in touch with this one woman I know who went to Vegas to reopen. I used to help her around her shop when I was younger. That was so much fun. I actually still have to get in touch with her. I was shocked that she was still alive and still had the same number, but I'm grateful for it because I would love to meet her and like show her how I've grown as a person and see how she's doing these days. But sometimes old people, like, how do I put this? I have the energy of an old person in the sense of like, I don't know how to explain it, but from a young age, I felt like I've always been here. I've already been here before. Like, certain things still hurt and sucked all the same, but I was still, like, seen as very mature for my age. One can chalk it up to autism, but I've just always had been a magnet to, like, older people as friends. Like, to this day, like, really. Like, I'll think someone's my age mate, and then they'll be, like, 35, and it's like, oh, feels like we have the same age. Interesting. But, you could be friends with anyone of any age, but I'll just put it to you like this way. I fucking hate anytime I've been on the UC Berkeley campus because I'll meet people who are my age. Like, between the ages of, like, fucking 16 to my current age of 24. Hard to believe I'm still 24, by the way. Scary. Time flies. Ugh. I'm gonna pretend I'm still 19. Yeah, let's go with that. Because I don't, yeah, let's pretend the passage of time hasn't happened because I don't know how to feel about that. But simply put, anytime I have been around a young person, they suck. Like, they're so annoying, especially the young men. It'll be like, oh, look, it's a guy my own age. And then he'll be like, righteous. Oh, yes. Got that immaculate res. And it's like, why do you talk like that? You make me want to kill myself just from being around you. And then, like, I'm not saying older men are inherently any better. It's like, no, it's like, Jesus, they're fucking terrible too. But it's like, they pay taxes. Like, it's like I got with that one older dude and he got me a fucking credit score. And now I have really good credit. Now, as I was saying before, I don't know, old people can just really help you out. And old people especially have a certain level of audacity that, like, you're told to respect your elders, to always take them seriously and never shun them. So that's why old people just talk to you any sort of fucking way. But I get along well with them for that reason. Because it's just like, why not? They're gonna die soon anyway. They don't have shit to lose. Some of them already know they're going to hell. Some of them are already on the fast track to heaven, and some of them know that they're going to be in a box like any fucking moment, deep 6 feet under, or turned into ashes and gone with the wind. So they'll just say and do whatever, because what's fucking stopping them? And I respect people with that mindset. I remember once when I was like, I'd say I was like 17. Yeah, I was about 17. I was on a BART ride and I felt absolutely miserable. And I had my sketchbook in my hand. And I guess I was sitting on the bus. Wait, no, I was standing. And I was holding it and I wrote like did some writing in it because usually I would like journal out my thoughts but also draw. And this older woman, she was sitting down and then she noticed it and she was like, "Ooh, I like that." And she tapped on a picture of like a lady in a dress on the like border of my sketchbook that I made. And I was like, "Oh, thank you so much. That's really sweet." And then she said, "I don't like that." And then she pointed to the list that I wrote that said 10 reasons to kill myself. And I was like, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry." She was like, "Don't do that. Don't do that ever." And I said, "Okay, I won't. I promise." And let's just say that word because here I am, still alive, like 7 years later. What to believe it's been 7 years. Hmm. Or sometimes I'll get lovely comments from people who are older on here, and it'll just be like insightful comments from people who have lived experience and can tell me about how things were back in the day, whether it was like when they were in their 20s in the 90s, or when they were like in their 20s in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and all their wild life adventures and all the fun they got to have. And I always value that. I really do appreciate it. And it's nice. You get to learn certain things, and especially how things were different during the time periods, but like still very similar to like how today is. Like, who, let me tell you, someone online was like, we need to start sharing stories and like respecting our elders and stuff and asking them how their lives were. Because bet your ass, if you asked your parents and grandparents the brutal reality of how dating was back in the day, you'd realize that ain't shit has changed all that much aside from a few apps. Like, there were still horny niggas getting all in your face with audacity There were still dumbass arguments and yeah, it was still just as stupid. Like, for example, I am glad that my mother did eventually tell me the brutal truth behind her own relationship with my dad, and also even with the fathers of her other kids that she had. Because it's like, yeah, before City Girl Summer or whatever, it's like, yeah, you just went to the fucking club because it's like, fuck that nigga, I loved him and he cheated on me, I'm gonna get my lick back. And she went to the club, met this fine ass, older ass dude. She was like, fuck it. And yeah, that's how my older brother was made. And then sadly, tragedy struck and my sister was made. But I won't go too much into that. Not saying the tragedy is that my sister was made. I'm just saying, even though I didn't like her, but you know, sorry, that's a little. I'm not saying she's the tragedy. I'm saying it's like my mom went through something traumatic, and I feel really bad about that. But and she talked about the complexities about getting an abortion, but she decided to keep them and all that, and all the stuff she struggled with, and she persevered through a lot. And then for my own dad, it's like that was her best fucking friend for like a decade or so. Then they dated, but he had all of his trauma and he really, my dad went through the fucking ringer. I'm talking like, like he would be the type of dude where it's like, oh yeah, I think my girl's cheating on me. And every time I ask her, she says she's not. But then one day he just drove past our house. A nigga's car was parked there that wasn't supposed to be there. He knocks on the door and she opens it like naked in another man's robe. And it's like, oh yeah. And then like he also like even awful shit. Like he'd be going down, like he'd be like, I'm seeing this new lovely girl. Surely this one won't cheat on me. And then as he was going down on her, like a used condom that was not his came out of her. And I'm just saying, I'm surprised he didn't. Yeah, let's just. If I were in his shoes, I'd be committing an act that would send me to fucking jail. But and then let's just say it really fucked with his head. And I guess like my mom was a very attractive, very popular lady with men and women. Not on some bisexual shit just because she was a very social butterfly type person. And then let's just say he didn't handle that well, and then let's just say he was a weird ass nigga just throwing fucking bricks through windows and shit out of insecurity and like hiding in the bushes, waiting for like niggas to pop up, trying to take my mom out on dates and stuff, losing his fucking mind. And it's like, that's not too different from how dating is these days, I'm gonna be honest. Yeah. And anyway, let's just say I was the result of a restraining order violation, but a consensual one. She made it clear that it's like no sort of rape happened. It was not like it was just literally just the case of like, there we go, there's my little ex bestie situation ship, whatever the fuck. Let's talk it out. Damn, he looks kind of good. You know what? And then they did what they did, and then I was created. Eh. Life is a gift. But good fucking god, ma'am. And I remember my grandmother, she eventually did tell me the story about how her and my grandfather met. Old people love stories are a special kind of fucked up, and it's so funny because they're just so unself aware about it. Like my grandmother on my dad's side, she was like, oh, the way me and your grandfather met, I was on my sister's balcony wearing a nice silk robe with nothing underneath, and I was just admiring the sun and having breakfast up there, and I stood up to go look at the nice, beautiful skyline view. And then next thing you know, I just hear a man's voice from underneath the patio on the balcony yelling, well, I'll be damned. Lord have mercy, heavens be. And then she looked over the fucking edge of the balcony, and there was my grandfather looking up her fucking robe like a disgusting fucking pervert, just straight up getting a whole eye full of like pussy and butt. And it's like, okay, it's like in thighs. And then next thing you know, like she obviously screamed in terror and went into her apartment. And then this nigga just full on with his audacious ass, he goes up the steps and starts banging on the door, knocking hella times, refusing to go away. She opens the door. He's like, hey, what's your name, sweetheart? She goes, leave me alone. He says, tell me your name. She says, leave me alone. She tries to close the door. This freaky ass nigga puts his foot in the door, hand on the door, and holds it open. And he said, I said, tell me what your name is. And then she's like, and she says her name. And then he's like, well, hey there. You look mighty nice. Maybe I'll see you around sometime. And she was like, but then like she was disgusted, but she was like, yeah, kind of cute. And then let's just say one thing led to another. One thing led to another. And then they became friends and stuff. And let's just say sadly they had a very fucked up marriage. And also he had kids outside of the marriage that we only just found out about. Like this fucking year. That was wild. I guess I have cousins out there because he decided to cheat on her when she was pregnant. Evil man. Disgusting. But yeah, that's how they met. Niggas ain't shit. Yeah. So if you thought shit was messy these days like imagine how it was back then when you didn't have phones and like ooh. Mm. But also, I have this one friend. He's an older gentleman, and he has told me like, I can't. I'm not gonna say his name or whatever. I'll just say he has told me some wild stories. Like if you looked at him, you would just think he was a shy old grandpa, like a dirty Santa Claus or whatever. But then he will tell you the coolest shit ever. He'll be like, "Yeah, back in the day, I got arrested for growing weed in the '70s, but my dad was friends with the DA, so they managed to get me a decent slap on the wrist. I only had to spend like 1 or 2 months in jail." But then he talked about cool shit, like how his friends would like put tabs of acid underneath like the stamps and letters so that then he could get super fucking high in jail and just have acid trips nonstop. And how they were making like prison hooch and like they were still sneaking weed and how they had a fucking blast. And he just was like, yeah, prison was cool as fuck. I got to befriend all these dudes and share stories. We just were like playing cards, getting high, getting drunk, sharing stories. It was a blast. And like he even talked about how he was gonna evade jail because he was on this like cool island in Florida that was kind of like a cult, like a nudist colony cult. And they were super cool. He was like, hell yeah, like we were just doing endless amounts of like fucking shrooms, ayahuasca, like just like hella weed. We were fishing all the time, naked, tons of sex, no condoms, all natural, just dancing around, nature, water, fresh fruit. It was amazing. I could have avoided going to jail and just been on the run, but I decided to turn myself in, and it was just 2 months of partying in jail, baby. And he would tell me about all these like amazing, gorgeous, like stallion type women he had back in the '70s. He was like, "Ooh, I met this one 6 foot tall Amazonian beauty, beautiful dark skin. Like she looked just like Pam Anderson, but even bigger tits and huge. Like she was huge. She was like tall and almost as wide as I was, hips wide, big. Oh, she was amazing. She would walk into a room, afro fucking picked out and curled out, and everyone would just stop and turn their head. She was so gorgeous. And like and also he showed me photos of how he looked back in the day, and I'm gonna say it, wow, absolutely would, holy fucking shit, good fucking damn, he was sexy, damn. It's like if it were the '70s and I met him, whoo, ooh, 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 I see the light, I see the light. But I love hearing stories from old people, especially when they go through tragedy. Like, and that's something I very much value. I value the type of people who have gone through things, and if they see someone going through similar, they aim to help them out. That's something I aim for with my own content and with my own life. And that feels good. It feels good. Hmm. So I don't know. Just like, it never hurts to befriend an old person. Ever. It can be, you can have some of the best conversations ever. And like, yeah, actually, I remember this one guy I dated. His name was Patrick number one. Oh, his name was Patrick number one because he was the first Patrick I dated, but he also was the hotter one and superior in a bunch of ways. So, what can I say? And he had a very troublesome childhood, but let's just say like some of the sweetest moments I had where I would be like, oh, he got. I remember I used to talk with his mom in the kitchen so much about her life and my life and sharing experiences, and it was such a lovely time. And eventually, like, I remember one morning, like, we got up nice and early, and it went from like breakfast to lunch to like damn near almost dinner time of me and her just sitting at the dinner table talking, talking, talking. And he was my boyfriend at the time. Patrick just walked in and just with a stare, he was like, you're still in here with her? And I was like, yeah, we're having a blast. And we would roast the shit out of him together. That was fun. And he walked into the living room, and his dad looked up from the newspaper, and he was like, she's still in there talking to your mother, huh? He was like, yeah. And he was like, good luck, son, you're gonna need it. And just went back to his newspaper. But like, and I remember that specifically Patrick's mother told me a lot of interesting stories. Like, I had to learn about her really abusive childhood from him, but I did get to hear about like how she met her current husband and the love story they had, like how they were just like friends of friends and then became roommates that then got really close, and then next thing you know they were roommates again, and it was like a on and off sort of thing. But then next thing you know they really fell for each other, and how they were poor as shit in the '70s and '80s, just trying to make it during hard times, and like if they were struggling financially and times were rough, but they were the type of person where they were like, yeah, we only had $9, between the both of us, and we just had to buy a big burrito and split it between us, and that we would have to make it stretch for like a week straight. And she would tell us about, like, I don't know, I'm very, and she always told me that she loved that I had ambition and drive and all that, and it was wonderful. And I especially love whenever I get to talk to older women. They have the like, because especially when you're a young woman, the best thing you can do is have an older woman who's smart. Not just any dumb bitch. Like, trust me, I've met older women who are fucking stupid, let me tell you. Oh, they're also the worst people to have as managers, but I'm just saying. As for, but yeah, oh my god, these bitches. I mean, sorry. I was zoning out. Sorry, I forgot which video I was making. I'm sorry. That's random intermission. But yeah, she told me a lot about her life. Like, she told me about how when she did eventually have like her first son, and then like her miscarriage, and then how she had like Patrick entirely by accident, like 7 years into like thinking they were both infertile and never were gonna have kids again. And she talked about like the pain and the loss of trauma and how it felt to sadly lose her first son. It was a very, and like the exact place where they had a memorial built, and how the lawsuit against the school went, because let's just say the school knew better than to play flag football on concrete, and her first son Sam could have avoided. Yeah, I still get sad every time I think about that story. I think that was one of the reasons me and Patrick got along really well, because I remember we were just a casual thing, but I think what something clicked for him the third time we ever like had a date, because like, sure, we had sex and all that, and we were gonna like, but I don't know, let's just say I remember he told me the story about how he lost his brother. And I'm someone who, like, topics of grief can be very difficult, and like I said, I'm someone where if I tell a story, sometimes I relive it as I'm telling it, which is why I can get so frustrated or accidentally ruin my own day remembering certain things, because I just get sucked in because it all plays out perfectly. That's the curse of having really good memory, is that you can swoon for someone again who you used to hate or still hate to this day, or I don't know. But I cried really hard at this like Venezuelan restaurant, I think, that we were eating pupusas at, after he told me about his brother passing away. And I think that kind of, he was very attracted to me after that. And I guess it was something that he hadn't really told many people. Like, he just didn't tell people for years, because it was something that, yeah, I don't know. I like to believe there are good people in this world, but then I kind of forget that it's not always common to that people have souls. Some people are very selfish, narcissistic, rude, or self-centered. So they just saw him as a buzzkill and not someone deserving of love and grace, and I think that's sad. But I guess, it made it good because he liked me for it, and we had a pretty solid enough bond, little thing. And I got to have days of, like, just hanging out with his mother. And his mother was also very sweet, because I guess, like, they both found out about, like, my previous eating disorder and my struggles at home and how rough things were for me. And she would go out of her way where if there was ever a moment she could give me food, she'd be like, "Here, eat these peaches. Here, try this fruitcake I made. Oh, you gotta have this. Oh, this pasta." And then, like, she was always trying to feed me. And she was always extremely sweet and caring and doting. And people, like, I'm also making this video because I'm reading this webcomic on Webtoon called Trailer Trash Tabitha. And the biggest character in the story who's helping her out is her own grandmother, who gave her a ton of advice and like life experience, and is trying to rebuild her confidence, and it's very beautiful. And I remember that when I was younger, like, I my mom was a nightmare. Like, and she only got worse with time. It's actually jarring, like, the difference between how it was when I was like 4. Like, yeah, she could be a menace, but it's like, trust me, like, I remember when I was 4, I still admired my mother. I refuse to say the L word about her, even in past tense anymore. She doesn't deserve that, right? But let's just say it was like a nightmarish change over the course of like the following 17 years, where it stopped being like one abrupt blow up every now and then, and just like a full on extreme disgusting mental decline. But let's not talk about that. I want to be happy today. Hmm. Let's just say my grandmother did eventually decide I should try to build a relationship with this girl. because who knows how her fucking mother is. And then she was right to do so, because then she was like, "Ooh, let's get you some new clothes. Let's get you some makeup. Let's get your eyebrows waxed. Let's teach you about like hygiene and class and manners and like teach you the way to dress." And I still remember the way that my grandmother was like to me, "If you ever want confidence, the best thing you can always do is put on some nice like all black pantyhose and some black little kitten heels and a nice little like black dress that fits down to your knees, and a dress that's like nice and form fitting but classy, elegant, no cleavage showing, and a nice little blazer, and you take on the day, put on a black beret, and do your thing." And I still followed that fashion advice. It's how I got several very nice jobs when I was younger. Like my first job when I was like 14, yeah, wow, more like 13, was at a boutique selling clubwear to women because I dressed that way, and then I still dress that way to this day. And I turn heads still, and I still remember fondly the stories my grandmother told me about how when she was young, she did modeling and like, or at least tried. It was one of those modeling scams, but fuck it. If you pay that much money for a modeling school that's a scam, you get to call yourself a model. She still got pictures to prove it, so fuck it. And she said the best way to she talked about the absolute best ways to like talk and speak and manners and posture and all that good stuff. And she put me onto a lot of stuff, like because of like funny enough, like people get shocked when I tell them that my Muslim grandmother is the one who got me into shit like Black Butler and Death Note and stuff, or mostly Black Butler. I think I found Death Note mostly by myself. Like it's like, yeah, she's the one who put me onto like anime and stuff, and it was so like some dark ass anime, Jesus. And into like Korean soap operas and like Japanese stuff, and she told me stuff about the world, and I listened and learned from it, and I'm grateful for that. So if you ever have a chance to befriend an old person, go ahead and do so. And if you have a chance to just listen and ask them questions about their life, I'm sure they would love to tell you everything. That's the best thing you can do. I've met some amazing people and some amazing life stories that way, and I've managed to learn some lessons from them without even having to be so like, hell, I'm 24, and I've managed to learn a lot of lessons from people who were older and more experienced just because I heard them out without it and didn't like let my ego or anything get in the way. Doesn't mean all old people have great advice, because if you ask my grandmother about vaginal hygiene, she'd probably tell you to use Norforms. Don't do that. Don't put peachy baking soda vinegary pills up your vajayjay to make it smell good. Don't do that. Like, it's no, that's just a scam, and it gives you a bacterial infection that smells good. Don't do that, like, at all. But, you can learn from old people's mistakes and their regrets in life and all that. If anything, like my grandmother on my mom's side, I remember she told me that something that really fucked up her relationship between her parents forever was that her dad was cheating on her mom. And she saw how that really fucked up their family for good, and how it destroyed her mother, and how she always hated her dad after that point. And his dad's new bitch, because, why respect the side chick? It's disgusting. But then she also talked about, like, she would also talk about, like, like, oh yeah, back in our day, we had this dude, he was mentally disabled. And, she told us about, like, how back then there wasn't a such thing as, like, autism or ADHD or whatever. It's just called being the R word or being stupid, and they just mocked him for being weird. But in reality, he was a nice guy, never bothered anybody, and he was actually very sweet. But kids would pick on him all the time because they didn't know any better. It's a damn shame. Oh, but as I was saying, and then my grandmother's gripe with her mother was that apparently when my grandmother was a child, like a teenager, she was extremely talented at sports, because she was so tall and had those long arms and like a good build for it, and she was quick on her feet, kind of a tomboy, and she was excelling in sports. And then she had the chance to go to China, and if she went to China to do sports back in the day, there was a huge chance she could have had a successful career off of it. But her mother was like, no, you can't. You can't do it. You absolutely cannot. And that fucked up my grandmother really hard, and she hated the mother for the rest of the days. Frankly, I wish that if, I don't know, sometimes I hear these stories and I feel bad for certain older people. It's like, I wish I had a time machine so I could go back in the day and just try to tell my grandmother on my dad's side, like, no, this man's a pervert. He is dangerous. He is unsafe, and he knows that. And you should not be with this man. I would tell my mother, you should get that abortion. Like, you don't have to, like, you should. Like, keep the first two kids if you want, but the third one, like, let's just say, spare yourself. Or spare me. But, maybe it's good my head didn't get crushed by some forceps when I was like 0.1 months old or whatever. It's good that I'm here and not like in some sort of waste bin at a fucking hospital, so let's be happy about that. And like but I would definitely go back in time and tell my grandmother, like, forge the signature on the permission slip and go to China anyway, or get the passport, or do what you have to, like try to convince, like, nah. Or at the very least, there's a million things I think my grandmother could have done differently. But it is interesting to see how some people forged their path, and like what they did right and what they did wrong, and all that went wrong and how they persevered through it. And I think it can just be amazing, ambitious tales that can really like inspire people, and they're necessary. So now it's like, okay, my grandmother on my mom's side taught me that sometimes you have to do shit that your family doesn't agree with. I remember she even told me about how she fled from her own abusive, like, shitty ass mother, and that inspired me to leave, because it's like, hey, fuck it. And like hearing, yeah, just certain things happened. My mom telling me about how her own mother treated her kind of taught me, like, oh, I should never allow my own mother to treat me this way, or else I'm gonna be like how my own mother just like enables the bad treatment. Like, yeah, my mom had a gun in her face by her own mother when she was 4. And then my grandmother said, you ain't shit and you ain't never gonna be shit. Just like I ain't shit, before she passed out from drugs. And that scarred my mother for the rest of her life, even 40 years later. And even though my mother didn't put a gun on me, she did plenty more things that were bad. And so it's like, okay, I, yeah. And I don't want to be like my mother in the sense of, ooh, I'm going to constantly try to win this woman's affection or hope that she can be a good person at heart or be grateful for anything. Like, no. I learned my lesson through them. And yeah, that's why we're estranged. It's healthier this way. I need to forge a path that is far from what happened with my mother, because if my mother was distanced from her mother, things could have been avoided. Or if my grandmother did, like, I don't know. I'm just saying, you take the good with the bad, you learn lessons from people of the past, and you learn how to make certain things not happen again in the future, and what you can change and what you can control, and the blessings you can get. So while you, like, like women have a bunch more freedom these days, a lot more autonomy, a lot more blessings, and take any chance you can get that you know will benefit you, and try to stay away from the ones that you know won't. But life can surprise you. Anyway, moral of the story, try to befriend an old person, because even if you can't relate to their life, you can still learn an amazing viewpoint and worldview from a certain time period, from a certain person, and it can just astound you and amaze you. Anyway, peace out. Bye.